all of you to know that he really considers you all part of a community of caring people. I'm just going to let Andrew speak with you a bit, and I'm sure he's also inviting questions from all of you. He's also inviting visits to the bird, the parrot, and Maria is as well. So why don't I turn this to you, Andrew, and then I don't know if you want to use the microphone. Yeah, so it's not portable. So I'm sorry, you will have to be at the podium if that's okay. Of course. Thank you. Or you can use, would you want to use one of those? Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Hello? Hello, hey. Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is Andrew Pacheco. And my people are the Lepant Inde, tall grass people from Texas. And I am a Nayeniskane, a two-spirit individual. This is how I come to you. I am truly honored to be a part of this auspicious and inspiring event to celebrate somebody's footsteps upon this beautiful planet as they continue. I want to say thank you. I have some notes here. Ultimately, in the core of my spirit, I'm a very shy and private person. Yes, indeed. The Getty here is a crossroads of many cultures, and it offers a visual displays of collections from many, many parts of this beautiful planet. Some of these examples of artistries are what I considered from non-existence as they were once known civilizations and cultures. Keeping that in mind, I seek to share part of what is known as a living culture, Apache culture, Lepant Inde culture. And I have in front of me examples of the things that I've created by hand, needle and thread, one bead at a time. But ultimately, and my partner suggested this, that I speak about as a two-spirited individual, the energy that I possess in my spirit, not by choice, but by who I am, acknowledged by my people, is a linchpin in our community. We hold things together in our ways with ceremony, which do take place to this day. Also, we hold these greater understandings of what a community looks like when everybody's in its place, in their place, that we hold together. The dances, the fires, the crown dances, the naming ceremonies, sunrise ceremonies, we are there. And I would like to share part of that greater understanding with you today. The things I create from feathers can be described. I have two examples of the feather work that I do, ultimately four, but the two I'm speaking about now directly is this fan here is described as a scatter fan or barrel fan because of the way the feathers scatter, and the blue, once again, is a barrel or scatter fan. And this is how I describe these, pardon me. The fringe on this fan particularly is a twisted green fringe and is described as the Apache style. Any fringe that you see has been painted or twisted is done in the Apache way, specifically to the Southern Plains. This one right here is has fringe, but it's based on the peyote ceremony. Your peyote fans will have 12 fringes in a traditional manner, 12 going back. And I hope I'm not sharing secrets of the people, but knowledge must be shared. 6 going back on the fringe. For the parents, 6 for your father's side going back, 6 for your mother's side going back. These are two examples of the fans that I create. This fan right here is a heart side fan, wing fan of loose feathers that I put together as a gift for a very important person during this time. This is once again reflecting of the 12 fringes, 6 going back for father, 6 going back for mother in no particular order. This is what I create for these dancing ceremonies and social dances as well. What we have in the center is what I call a prayer staff. This is something that is not a dance stick. It's for private ceremonies, and it's something that is associated most directly with the peyote ceremonies. There's a timing that takes place in the ceremonies which occurs from sunset to sunrise. At a certain point in the ceremony, the prayer staff is brought out and is used in a formal prayer. This is, once again, I'm going to put this thing down. Now they're a matching set. This is that prayer staff, fully beaded, one bead at a time, with needle and thread. The eagle plumes on top represent the breath of life. This is one of the most sacred objects and most indigenous to this land understanding is that breath of life, that plume. When a young girl is moving on to becoming a young woman, a life giver, this plume is attached to her hair, after a certain ceremony, this eagle plume. That represents the breath of life. Those bells I attach because they're calling in those spirits, those understandings greater than myself. We are never truly alone, like the birds remind me and many people that you're not alone when you hear a bird sing, when you notice that special feather on the ground, when you're thinking about something, or that crow that'll be like, I got a secret and you need to find out. You're going to benefit from it. How to evolve and move forward in regards to how these things are put together, how I realize them for myself. I realized that one day they're going to say about me and this gathering that it was done in 2024, that we are here. When something is remembered, it exists. A lot of our culture has evolved in a time when the land was cleaner, so to speak, when water was available to everybody. We moved around. We were hunters and gatherers. My family came up from Texas following the crops, going up to Central California. It's like our trail of hunting and gathering, so to speak, but in the fields and the so forth and so on. But also speaking of gathering, I'd have to look over here with May. She's the ambassador of what I'm trying to say and what I'm sharing, I believe, from my heart. May, a blue-throated macaw, found it originally in the Bolivian, not May particularly, but her people, her avian family is found in the Bolivian rainforest on a small parcel that has been protected by the government. And she has become an ambassador for me and for many people. There's only 1,800 of her species alive on this planet, in this world. 300 in the wild, approximately. 1,500 in captivity, approximately. And when I see something like her and know that it's so detrimental to the greater understanding of who we are as a people, something so beautiful and considered so sacred to many, many people, my people as well. I think for myself, it's if nothing else, it's a time to celebrate what I can from what I know, but from the sharing. I celebrate who I am by representation, by representing who I am as a people in the artistry that I create, but also in the acknowledgement, because language is something more than just compromising or composing a thought and sharing it and having a response. I think it's of color. It's out of energy, it's compassion. It's becoming a universal statement of acceptance. She's very peaceful at this particular point in time because she knows that she's thought of in a very compassionate way. And for me, it's something that I think we all can learn from this understanding of how feathers. This morning I woke up at 5 o'clock. I don't know how long I was asleep because I felt so much in my heart being part of this beautiful event. And the first thing that I heard was that crow. And I'm like, oh, man, he said, I have that skeleton key. What's in front of you, I'm going to give you this abalone in your mouth or this piece of turquoise for you to learn more about what you need to learn in your spirit as far as conveying these messages and representing the people. And then I was like, okay, tried to take it all in. Then I heard this chorus of birds, these random little birds in the concrete canyons and crowded desert of Los Angeles. And I said to myself, if they can be happy in the concrete canyons and crowded desert, so can I. And I'm not saying I was unhappy, but I'm saying they're really just putting it out there saying, we are here, we are celebrating life. One of the feathers that I worked with, and this came to me specifically at this time, this story I wanted to share with you as quickly as possible. My partner has given me these cue cards. When I began my journey as far as doing the beadwork that I do, I knew it was unnecessary. It's not something that my family does a lot of beadwork, but I knew that I needed to create it because of who I am and the messages that we need to convey to each other at our social gatherings. I was doing some work, and I went out to the desert, and I had put a little bit of beadwork on a feather, a beaded feather, something that's very traditional to us. And I approached some Apaches. They were not related, and I presented to some of the aunties who were doing beadwork at this gathering, and I said, I would like to learn. Will you share with me some things? She looked directly at my work, and she says, I cannot teach you anything. And I took that as being a statement about who I am as a two-spirit individual. And so I continued my journey as far as beading, and ultimately, as a result of this conversation, I was inspired to bead on a cruise stick, a dance stick, like a stick, an eagle staff. And I had beaded it fully, completely. It was just, I think it was one of my magnus opus here. And I had gone to a powwow in El Camino, and I had something said to me, you need to have 7 feathers on this stick, dress it up in this way. And I was, like in the audience here, there's a lot of people gathering here. Life givers told me, literally in my left ear, it always speaks in my left ear, speak to this person. I walked to this other native person who was there. He's all looking all rugged and just a lot of, and what happened was I said, I'm told to ask you for 7 feathers. He looked at me. He reached underneath his table, unfolded this piece of plastic, I believe, and counted out 7 feathers. The Cooper hawk. The Cooper hawk flies through the trees and the wires to reach its goal. Inspires me to this day. And I hope that some of my words and some of what I've shared with you will fly into your hearts to some degree, and possibly to assist you in seeing something differently about what you do, because it's so very, very important. I'm a simple person, and I describe myself as a few beads and a few feathers. But I do know that one day, when time passes on, in 2024, you had this one person that was doing this work here in LA. And I'm so blessed. And thank you. Thank you. And I have 2 minutes. I want to sing a real quick song to say thank you, if that's possible. Thank you. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sarah Kaplan, and I am an objects conservator. I work at Winterthur Museum, and I also teach at the Winterthur University of Delaware program in art conservation. And I'm very honored to be here, and also very honored to be the session chair for session 3. And I just wanted to thank you so much, Andrew, for that beautiful sharing. I think we all really appreciated hearing from you. Let's give Andrew another big round of applause. Okay, so our next speaker is Carlos Barrera Reyes, a visual artist and professor and doctoral student in the Faculty of Arts and Designs at UNAM, the Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México. And Carlos will be speaking to us today about replicating Mexican featherwork. So please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation, Ellen. Thank you. It's in the other side. Over the past 2 decades, in Europe and in Mexico, a group formed by restored Laura Filloy, Mario Olvido Moreno, Melanie Korn, and Renee Riedler have been involved in research projects to explore the essential materials and manufacturing techniques of Mesoamerican artifacts, made with bear feathers, which have endured for 5 centuries and include 6 objects: the Quexochimali and the Tapacalis in Mexico, the Moctezuma headdress and the Kenyan shield in Austria, and the 2 Chicalcoliqui chimalis in Germany. In all cases, the information derived from interdisciplinary collaboration has generated valuable scientific information that allows us to reflect on this tradition and to propose through experimental archaeology and creativity some of the process of its production. In 2019, I was invited to participate in this project called Plumaria of Mexico, Art and Technology, with the objective to replicating featherwork components and objects from the use of traditional techniques and raw materials, and thus have better understanding of the technological decision of the feather workers of the past. Building upon this initiative, I decided to create a complete shield, incorporating all structural and decorative components. This work involved combining information from 2 distinct sources, the Tapacalis and the Kenyan shield. This initial exercise aimed to develop the 4 components that constitute a shield: the mat support, which is crafted using the tying technique and sewing technique, the feather mosaic created with the mosaic technique, the feather border constructed using the tying technique, and the feather pendants made with a combination of mosaic and tying technique. This is number 4. We are going to go in order. So the first one, the construction of the support. The first step involved constructing a mat support measuring 16 inches of diameter. This initial process represented a challenge to preserve the order and position of the 162 rods during the assembly of the double layer of matting require designing strategies that are not described in the Florentine Codex. For example, marking distances with a pencil, tying wooden roots in the extremities as a temporary frame to avoid displacement, and using weights to keep the surface flat. Yes, it is a rock. Joining the 2 mats was carried out from the center to the ends using 2 strands of agave, known as enneken. However, the choice of enneken as a raw material was not ideal, as the strand in some cases broke. Once the rods were joined and cut to the corresponding diameter, they were reinforced with 4 wooden cross pieces sharpened at the ends and tied with enneken strands. A single strip of goat skin was sewn around the entire mat with a needle and 3 strands of enneken, which crossed the mat from one side to the other. Finally, for the arms, a piece of goat skin was placed in the form of a square, which was tied with enneken strands. Both handles, previously crafted with enneken strands and wrapped with goat skin, were secured to the square and the cross pieces. Number 2, the feather mosaic. For the central motif of the shield, I used the contemporary mosaic technique, since it was not possible to work either with the materials mentioned in the Florentine Codex, such as the glue extracted from an orchid called Southly, or with the cotton fiber paper. Instead, I opted for Campeche wax and amate paper, materials that had more body and therefore increased the thickness of the mosaic. Before starting the design, the feathers were selected based on their shape, color, and size. Then, sections of feather paper were assembled to achieve the integrated design. First, amate paper cutouts were prepared and covered with Campeche wax and feather tips. In general, the placement of the feathers began from the outside in, as was done on the original 15th century piece. For this mosaic, 7 types of feathers from 6 bird species were selected. The objective was to experiment with different results by gluing each feather on the Campeche wax, and at the same time to observe the different optical effects from the color, feather patterns, brightness, and iridescence. A total of 5,218 feather fragments of less than 0.4 inches in length were glued. The feather bird species utilized include common pheasant feathers, guinea-fowl feathers, agaporni feathers of 6 different colors, Australian parakeet, 2 types of lady hember's pheasant feathers, and pigeon feathers. Number 3, the feather border. For the making of the border of the shield, I was inspired by the shield in Vienna, which is composed of 6 guys with feathers from 3 different bird species, roseate spoonbill, lovely cotinga, and quetzal, which were tied and knotted one by one with agave fibers. At this stage, I had access to Isla strands, obtained in my Miahuatlán de Porfirio Díaz, Oaxaca. Its softness, flexibility, and resistance were ideal for its use. To replicate a similar border, the first challenge was in the selection of the feathers, which should be of 3 different lengths: long, medium, and short. After several attempts, I opted for peacock feathers, rosella feathers, and agaporni feathers. To achieve the turquoise blue-green shade, it was necessary to dye the yellow agaporni feathers with indigo. For the first guide, 3 ties were made in the lower part of the feather using 2 strands of ixtle. You see the 3 knots, okay. The first tie is made downwards, the second upwards, and the third downwards again, with the intention that the forces used in the ties go in different directions. As for the second guide, 2 ties were made with 2 strands of ixtle, while for the third guide, only 1 tie was made using loose strands of ixtle. The concave anatomy, length, color, and iridescence of these 3 types of feathers allows that, once assembled in 3 guides and placed in 3 layers, their movement around the perimeter of the chimali is coordinated. In addition, thanks to the structural properties of the barbs of these feathers, when light falls on them, they shine. Number 4, the feather pendants, and the most difficult of the parts. For the feather pendants, several previous exercises had to be carried out in order to first, understand the technique. Second, select the appropriate feathers to allow the successful elaboration of the technique. And third, combine the technique used with other elements of the chimali. As a reference, the feather pendant is made up of 3 different parts. Number 1, the pendant, which is made with traditional tying technique. Number 2, the lower component of the pendant, that is a tassel in the shape of a cone, which is made with traditional mosaic and tying technique. And 3, a component of the tassel, which is made with traditional tying technique. For the pendant, 80 green pheasant feathers were knotted to the thread previously made with several strands of ixtle. 9 were knotted vertically and 9 in the opposite direction. This first exercise seems to work in technique and form. The second step consisted in testing the cones. They were done with the traditional technique, using cotton paper and southly, the orchid glue. For this, the correct specimens had to be obtained and to later extract the glue. In this stage, the collaboration with the restorers in the group allowed me to make corrections in size and techniques. Once the cones were ready, we experimented with the last part of the pendant. 4 tests were made with different feathers and sizes. The fourth exercise was with 11 green pheasant feathers of 3 inches, which were stripped of their soft barbs. The ixtle strands were of fundamental importance for this elaboration due to its flexibility and resistance. In total, 7,732 feathers of 9 different types of shapes from 8 bird species have been used so far. The feathers of agaporni, Australian parakeet, and pigeon were obtained at the Sonora market in Mexico City. The pheasant, guinea fowl, peacock, and rosella feathers were obtained from moonlightfeathers.com, which is certified for the sale of feathers. It is important to say that all the feathers used are from commercial birds, and they are not in the endangered species list. Some conclusions about material techniques and collaboration. Number 1, about the traditional material. Selecting the right material for feather component, such as orchid glue, cotton paper, and ixtle fiber, is paramount. Number 2, carefully choosing feather is crucial, considering their structure, shape, color, and iridescence when replicating techniques from pre-Hispanic objects. It's essential to ensure the origin of the feathers and determine the appropriate quantity to achieve desired shapes and proportions. Number 3, it is possible to substitute and work with commercial feathers to replicate and achieve similar results in terms of shape and iridescence as is seen in pre-Hispanic feather objects. Number 4, conducting preliminary exercises and experimenting with materials are helpful in mastering the techniques required. It is also important to know and describe the sequential steps of the achievement for the achievement of the decorative components. And 5, maintaining close and ongoing collaboration with researchers who have studied original feather objects is crucial. This ensures accuracy in dimensions and details that may not be apparent from the photographs. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Our last speaker for this session is Renee Riedler, an objects conservator and preventive care specialist at the Weltmuseum Wien, and her talk will discuss feather replication as a conservation strategy. Please join me in welcoming Renee.
Hello, everybody. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm excited to honor Ellen's career. I was intern in 2009, accepted by her and Jim Drusik, and I never thought that I was standing here 15 years later, still engaged in feathers and birds and crazy about feathers. And yeah, I think this was also because of our friendship and Ellen mentoring my career as a conservator. So Ellen asked me to talk about feather replication as a conservation strategy because I'm currently making with Maria Olvido Guzman and Carlos Barrera Reyes a replica. And well, in conservation practice, we carry out various performative acts, and we call the products a reconstruction, a copy, a dummy, a substitute. In sharp contrast to Andrew and Carlos, who impressively demonstrated the power of a regalia and making a mosaic, conservators rarely have the bodily experience of making, wearing, and using replicas and objects we care for. Nevertheless, we still have the privilege to engage with all our senses with the materiality of historic objects. We feel joy when we sense the smoothness of well-preserved historic leather and experience the worry when leather becomes stiff. We knock on wood with a micro tool and the sound tells us if the space behind a veneer is hollow or not. And we smell ritually applied smoke and the pungent odor of naphthalene, which leaves a sour-sweet taste on our lips. Our entire senses act like little antennas, which together are crucial for fully capturing a material, a technique, a condition. Based on all senses, we make judgments on objects' conditions, which then determine our treatment decisions. A treatment is not carried out randomly, but almost always as part of an exhibition, a publication, or an online presentation. These analog and digital spaces are dominated by the sense of vision, which allows the museum visitor only limited access to the object. No? Immersive is a buzzword on today's museum's websites. The visitor and online collection explorers are asked to immerse themselves in art and histories, technologies, learning experiences. To immerse means to be or to become completely involved in something so that you do not notice anything else. But is this possible without engaging all our senses? The object is behind the glass of a showcase or computer screen, and unconsciously in our conservation mind, the preservation of the visual appearance takes center stage. Or do we ever think about the preservation of smell? We look at the object and imagine how it should be presented, from which side, which angle, and which level of illumination. We supplement loss and make fills with a substitute which is reversible, at least retreatable, but in any case it should be distinguishable from the original when viewed up close. We mimic, we replicate, we trick the eye, because no one can experience the material beyond the visual. No touching, no smelling. And conservators have been immensely creative in exploring, adapting, and manipulating materials and tools for their needs, with regard to the object history and ethical requirements. No need to think beyond the visual, because the code of ethics prohibits us anyways from maintaining or repairing objects in a functional sense. And I'm referring to the code of ethics ECHO, which applies for the European conservators. The following 3 slides illustrate the power of the visual. With watercolor, pastel, and a good sense for color, we can erase the signs of time. A faded lorikeet regains its deep red plumage by inserting tiny feathers made by cutting and coloring white turkey feathers. The contemporary feather mask shown here, entitled Image Mask for the Trinity of Consciousness, got infested by moths, and a local pheasant provided the feathers to fill the lacuna, as if nothing had happened to the mask before. This treatment was carried out in collaboration with the artist of this piece, who asked for a full reconstruction. Another case of feather loss due to moth infestation impaired the visual appearance of this traditional dance and ceremonial headdress of the Torres Strait Islanders. Sheets of perspex painted with acrylic paints in fine brush strokes to mimic the directions of the barbs are attached at the backside. This beautiful treatment has met all the requirements of our code of ethics. It is fully reversible, and the supplementary feathers are easily distinguishable from the original, while from a distance it gives the impression of a well-preserved headdress that can be worn immediately. Since Ellen Pearlstein dived deep into the feather world and connected with regalia makers and cultural experts, the conservation community looks differently at the feather that is beyond a static visual appearance. We imagine the feathers on the living birds and in their afterlives vibrating with the dances. We acknowledge that feathers go through a life cycle and that they convey stories, histories, and identities. Ellen's approach is always inter, multi, cross, trans, interdisciplinary, you name it. And she continuously brings to the forefront the interconnectedness of a dynamic global world, perceived through the lens of a single object. Throughout history, people have adapted to changing environments, historic events, to modern laws and regulations. Everything is a constant flow. But museums quite often invest a lot of energy and resources to maintain just the status quo of their rightfully or not acquired objects, and sometimes forget that heritage is also a bundle of relationships. And I wonder if the concept of regenerating rather than retaining, preserving acts, not artifacts, can be applied to the museum and our conservation practices. As an example for dynamic reactions toward a changing world, I would like to present a few case studies. Most Naga people of the current generation, for instance, have never actually seen a great hornbill bird, which is close to extinction in Nagaland. However, it is still considered the most important animal in Naga symbolism. The dancers for the yearly festivals wear nowadays headdresses with feathers which are skillfully made of cutouts of painted cardboard resembling hornbill feathers. Here's another example. Macao tail feathers were traditionally used for making mocheño headdresses, which are worn during the machetero dance and ritual in Bolivia. Now that the endemic blue-throated macaw is severely endangered, organizations like the Asociación Armonía promote the use of replacement material in local communities. Mocheño headdresses today are primarily made of synthetic feathers. As a marketing gag, a kit machetero was created, which is promoted with the remarkable slogan, Tradición sin extinción. Some cultural practices are maintained, others are forgotten, and some can be recovered against all odds. Linda Yamane, for instance, an Ohlone artist and tribal scholar, studied European collections to bring back the lost art of Ohlone basket making. While traditionally acorn woodpecker feathers were coiled into the baskets at the British Museum and the Musée de Quai-Branly, Linda works with dyed and clipped chicken feathers. Linda Yamane does not replicate objects, but she revitalizes a craft and cultural practice because, quote, I want people to see up close, personal, the beauty, the intricacy, because I think if people have something tangible, something to hold, it is going to bring respect to our ancestors. A few years ago, as you already heard from Carlos, Maria and I started a small-scale research project, by making a faithful feather replica of a colonial insignia, tries to go back 500 years in time, to replicate according to traditional materials and techniques. We experience how much the world has changed, what has sustained and what is lost. However, it is stunning how much we can learn from an object, how much the actual making is sharpening and enriching our senses. Plucking and cooking dye plants and insects, waiting for the birds to molt and the rainy season to harvest bamboo, listening to informants, teaching workshops, and fighting bureaucracy. I wish we could put more energy and resources into relationship building and knowledge sharing while still preserving the objects in collections. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Renee. And before we invite all of our panelists from session 3 for a discussion, let's give all of the session 3 speakers a nice round of applause. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. All right, well, so many things to discuss. So powerful presentations, powerful talks, lots of important themes we can delve into. And I thought I'd start us off with one question, and then maybe in the meantime, if anybody has questions they would like to ask, they can start making their way down to the microphones. So one concept that comes to mind in listening to these talks is the importance of feather authenticity in both original featherwork creations and in conservation. And I'd be curious to know the panel's thoughts on what feather authenticity means to them, whether that's on a material, cultural, symbolic, or spiritual level, or some combination, and how it plays a role in the objects they create or encounter.
There we go. I'm not that techy. If I may start, I'm honored to be up here with these fellow individuals here. I'm grateful. As in regards to the answer, simply because something is there and able to be used in your regalia, as far as does not necessarily make it apropos. I can use an example, very basic example of eagle feathers. A lot of contemporary North American indigenous people have feathers, and rightfully so, eagle feathers, but we also have a way of earning them. There's an earning. If somebody possesses an eagle feather of a certain type and variety, it means that there's a certain availability to rely upon that person to give strength to the community for a certain amount of wisdom and knowledge, and also the ability to lend the power of prayer. So certain things are not for everybody because there's a very deep, and I would like to say powerful responsibility for that.
I guess in conservation we have an easier task because our task is to use feathers which are distinguishable. So we do not use real feathers for various reasons. In my career, I think I never replicated a feather, an object where there was infestation of moth or another form of loss, because I work in an ethnographic museum and I would not feel like I can replace anything or add something. For contemporary art, it would be different because the artist will want to have a full reconstruction of the object if he's or she is still alive, and then I would replicate or would add an authentic feather, so coming from the same bird, yeah.
Wherefore, I'm just replicating some, I'm using some feather birds. And for me, it's important to see the color, and because when you start like working with the material, it says something. Is the way that you are. When I work with the material, it's very organic. It's a feeling very organic, and yes,
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good segue to a question I had for you, Carlos, which is, it's so amazing that you used over 7,000 feathers in the replication of the chimali. And you spoke a little bit about, at the end of your talk, about how you sourced those feathers and going through that process. But could you talk a little bit more about how you decided which feathers to use in particular areas?
Yes, it has a lot of feathers. And at the beginning, I didn't realize that what I was doing it, for sure. And I remember that I obtained some feathers and I started like doing, and I just did one piece of the design, and then I have to order another ones, and I used it, and then I had to order another one like 5 times, and it was crazy how many feathers you will need, because you take the tip of the feather. You don't use all the feather, so it's just the tip. But it depends which part of the chimali, of the shell. So in this first object, I want to experiment with many feathers as possible. That's why you see so many different colors, and because that was the challenge, to do exercise with different kind of feathers. That's why you can see many types of feathers. That's why I use so many different types. So, and then it depends the technique that you are going to do are the feathers that you're going to need. For example, for the feather border, you need the complete feathers. So you needed some feathers that are similar to the chimali in Vienna. So I think the peacock feathers were perfect for the first guide, that is like the biggest feathers. And then the other ones I just adapted to cover the part that I don't want to see it. So it's been a challenge, a complete challenge. And especially the last one, the pendant feathers. I've been working in that for probably like 2 years, because I had to use all the techniques in a very small piece. And I remember I did some exercises at the beginning, and I like it. And then I tried to do it with the right materials. And I was so happy because I said, oh, I did it. And then Renee was in my apartment last year, and she told me, do you know what, Carlos? It's too big. so now I'm doing it in a smaller. So it's a challenge.
But you have to imagine, Carlos did all that work based on photographs from a publication of my master thesis. He never had seen the object in Vienna. I mean, and then I shared all my images with him, and he will come in October to Vienna to spend 6 weeks there. So imagine.
So yes. But also Mario Olvido is my tutor, so she helped me a lot. Every step, she's been there, like watching what I'm doing. So thank you. So yes. Every step, she's been there. Yeah.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, question for you, Andrew. How would you feel if somebody in the future wanted to replicate your regalia?
I would specifically say, go for it. But you have to do the technique that I do this work. I have bowls that are half a gallon, I think, for water or what have you. And I mix all my beads together. Every single color are in these bowls. And what I do is, particularly when I'm doing coup sticks, dance sticks, eagle staffs, by request or for giveaways, not to vend. And what I do is I will have a bowl placed here, one here and one here. Actually, more like a plate, actually a lid to some kind of fast food, but it worked pretty darn good for what I'm using it for. I have a little cup. I just put it here, put it back, find the colors that I need. When I can't find it in this amount, I'll put it over here, get another cup, look for that color again, and so it goes round and round and round. And the reason why I mix the beads that I do is because I use contemporary Miyuki or Delica beads, and I like to keep the challenge in place for myself when I do create. I like to hunt and gather. So in the 12th hour, when I'm looking for this blush as opposed to rose, and I need it, and I find it, it's like such a victory. I'm like, yay, and I'm like, now I can go on to the next pattern. So if somebody would ever, I'd love to instruct, teach, impart my skills to someone, and I would be honored if somebody said, I want to know what you do, I want to learn it. I would be absolutely open to it. All of my patterns are identifiable to Apache peyoteas, but ultimately they're all one of a kind. It's a matter of understanding the rhythm of color, the element that you're working with, say something like a fire ceremony or in regards to water or different things. But I would tell ultimately the person, I would say, go for it.
Ellen, would you like to ask the question?
Yeah, once again, thank you all for those extraordinary presentations, really. You know, of course, as a conservator, I think a lot about how we conserve featherwork. And since the morning, I've been hearing more and more about the attributes that are so important in featherwork and in their positioning, their placement, the way that they, the way lighting interacts with the feather based on its position. Sherry talked earlier about movement. I'm sort of actually watching movement in Andrew's, but again, I'm watching the silk ribbons blow, and I'm imagining the feathers fanning out, and so I'm wondering about, and then Renee talked about how conservators have a certain ethic where we typically don't replace feathers with feathers. We replace them with an alternative material, as you showed. But how would you all envision it if we were working with the original kind of creators of this featherwork and having these discussions about all of those aspects, the movement, the luster, all of that. What would that look like in terms of the way we would conduct conservation work? I'm just curious if that is something you all have thoughts on.
I would love that. But as many of my colleagues in Europe can confirm, for example, working with Native American featherwork, how to meet and how to connect and how to work together. I think this is the biggest problem. I think that's different in California, for example, where you can meet and you can invite people and you can think about these things. But I think Zoom is not an appropriate way to discuss those things. I don't think the digital world is an option because it's about trust and relationship building. It's about long-term relationships. And just coming to Vienna, staying there for, 2 weeks, it's not sustainable, I think. So I don't know the answer.
Collaboration is necessary. And I've been working with indigenous community in the south of Mexico, and you need to be there if you want to create good relationships. You have to be there, and you have to be there for a long, long time. So it's not something easy to do. Relationships, human relationships are hard, and you need dialogue, you need to be friends. So I think, yes, I understand what you're saying. Yes, it's important to be there with the people.
And
Yeah.
because we as conservators, so we work, so we can focus maybe on one project, on one relationship, but we have a whole collection spanning from, I don't know, China to New Guinea, and then each exhibition brings new challenges and new objects, new cultural backgrounds, new sensitivities, new people in. So I have no idea how this would be possible. Yeah, but one can focus at least on one relationship building. For example, our collaboration with Maria and with Carlos and Melanie. So we have a long-term relationship and we trust each other. So that's why we can also work remotely, and we don't see each other for a year, and then we meet each other again, and then we continue. So
Working.
yeah.
I hope.
Yeah.
And if I may add, I think that I'm curious about so many beautiful things that I'm seeing today. And the question I have is, what would that be like to experience that object by a fire, a community dance, if I held that or if I was a part of that ceremony? I think a lot of things are relegated to this higher state of artistry and celebration of culture, where a part of them also can be experienced in the holding and in the ceremony. Like these feathers are beautiful on fans and different things, but when you see a macaw flying away from you through the rainforest, it's like that, you know, like a, pardon me, like a quetzal. When you see it coming out of its beautiful home, just how long is that tail going to be? You know, it has to be experienced to some degree, And I think there's inroads that can be established by traditional protocols and respect, and ultimately the convergence of the heart, that we're in this together. And I think that's something that we have a love for feathers. We have a love for what they represent, but ultimately we have a love for a global culture that I can recognize in some of the hornbill, the workmanship. I can recognize in brothers how he works with his feathers. I say, I can understand what he does. I may not be able to accomplish it myself, but I can understand the energy that he's working with to some degree. And that's something that I think it must be experienced. It must be personally, directly experienced to some degree.
Thank you. I have a question more specific for Andrew. Please, as you might have known, we have a pre-Hispanic mural painting on walls, on pyramids, and in all around Mesoamerica. And most of them, we name them archaeological sites or whatever. There is one in northeast Mexico, in the Huastec region. The name of the site is Tamuín. It's a Tenec culture. We still have Tenecs, and they speak Tenec, and it's a fantastic world. On these mural paintings, on structure A of Tamuín, archaeological pyramids, archaeological site, we have a representation that is being interpreted with 12 participants in a round structure, and they all face the same way. They look like they're giving a step or whatever, and they are dressed up beautiful and with tons of feather garments and regalia. And my question is, the object we can enjoy now that is on the table, it really looks the same that one is pictured on these walls. I swear, I have to share those pictures with you. So my question is, could you please tell us a little bit more about this object on the table? Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I'm honored. Once again, heavy the head that wears the otters is all I have to say, dear. Thank you for the question. This fan right here, and I say this from the most humble manner that possible, even though I am very, very proud of who I am. When I was asked to be a part of it, and pardon my back, I was asked to be a part of this event, and I knew there was a greater reason for me to be me than just for myself. I needed to be here. And Ellen extended her hand to me, and she said, I need for you to be at this event. I would be honored. And I said, who are you and what's going on? Yeah. I did, and I said it with compassion. I really did. And then I realized it is something very close to my heart that's culturally relevant and has potential for inspiring other people other than myself as part of this journey here. And I asked her directly, because it's culturally relevant, that we honor, we do our gifting to elders and ceremonialists and important people. We do this. This is part of our tobacco and feathers and fabrics and different things. And I asked her, I say, Ellen, I want to give you something. And I gave her 3 options. She said, any one of those options would be an option. And I had decided on a prayer fan. And I usually work with ocellated turkeys and different types of turkeys to make fans and different things. And I had that in mind for Ellen. And then I realized it was to be the blue and gold macaw. And I made this fan as a giveaway for Ellen to say thank you for who she is and the impact she's had on everybody's lives in this room. And this is why it is come into being. My partner, Vaughn, who needs to sit up at this particular point in time, Vaughn, because they're focusing upon you, of 33 years, he's held this fan. He was like, this is really correct and beautiful. So this is how it came into being. I spent 2 days, no sleep, with love in my heart for Ellen, and created the heart side fan. It's called the heart side fan. This is from the heart. And it's held in this manner, in a very formal way. And in this way, this is how it came into being. It's a beautiful question, and thank you for the confirmations once again. This is what it. Thank you. Thank you.
This is actually jumping on another aspect of Ellen's work in building the diversity, the Mellon opportunity for diversity in conservation, which addresses the question of engaging genuinely with the communities who actually own the things we have stewardship over. And this is also a question for Laura, who teaches. So could you address in any way you can the question of how conservation brings into the field people who are actually who have a closer stewardship, a closer relationship to the objects, because it's one thing to build those relationships for a consultation and engagement, but broadening the field so that people are within the museums and within the collections working as conservators, caring for objects. That was a bit of a roundabout question, but I hope it made some sense and reflected the work that Ellen's done in building diversity within the field.
Well, I can, to start off the answers, and just to say that it's not always possible to do, just for various logistical reasons, either because of distance or maybe the people are no longer here with us. I know all of these factors that can be at play, but I think for me the most important thing is to communicate the concept and to help students understand that this is so vitally important and to make it be not just an exception for special circumstances, but more the standard thing that we should be doing for all kinds of collections. And in our curriculum, we try to have people from different communities, from different cultures, speak to those things as much as possible. I feel like for myself as an educator, more and more, I feel that it's less appropriate for me to be telling other people's stories and try as much as I can. Of course, there are limitations there too, to bring people to tell their own stories. And I feel like that has been having an impact. Students have a lot of questions about how practically we do this, but the seed is planted, and I feel hopeful that over time it's going to become just the normal thing instead of, like I said, this special situation.
And I also think it depends on the institution. What is a museum? What does a museum want to be? Just as a place where you exhibit objects. And our museums are set up just from the architecture to the hierarchies, that it's more or less, you have an idea, you are curating an exhibition, you have exhibition managers, and then you have conservators who facilitate the exhibitions. But the whole museum is not set up to welcome people. For example, our museum does not even have yet a space for visitors to look at objects because it was never planned like this. So a museum would have to be new envisioned, also invented also, or so to make that possible, to have the resources, the setup, the welcoming, say it, protocols, all the things you need to feel people welcome in your collection. And right now it's a space where you fill the galleries with interesting, exciting or blockbuster exhibitions. You want a lot of people to come, to bring money, to sell a lot of tickets. So I think it's all about also museum politics and what do you want with these institutions.
I agree with Renee because I'm working with the Nabolón Museum in San Cristobal de las Casas, Chiapas, and they invite me to participate in the rescue of the textile collection that they have. And I had to hire a conservator because I am not a conservator. So, and I propose to show the textiles to the weavers that I'm working with in the other project. So they let me to, so we did like 10 exhibitions, and I bring all the weavers to each exhibition. And the first thing that they did when they entered to the exhibition was to start touching the fabrics, like, and they were like saying, "Oh, this is from my mother, this is from my uncle, and this is like." And at the beginning, I didn't believe it. I had to be honest. So I went to the archives to check, and it was right. So now I believe it. So, but this was very special, these exhibitions, because the museum led me to do whatever I want. So they give me the permission to do whatever I want, and I know that all the museums are not to allow to do that. For example, a museum in Mexico City, the Anthropology Museum, will never permit to do that, something like that. But this is like, this is not from the government museum, it's a private museum, and that's why I could do that. And it was a hit, because the weavers start to come into the exhibition, and they start to replicating the techniques, not the techniques, the embryo, like the motif of the pieces, because they lost them, some of them, so they start to doing just looking and go to the exhibition, and they need to look it, they need to touch it, and they need to go in the other side and count the threads, replicating, and they replicate it very easily. So they need to be access to the collection. But now we need money if we want to allow to the weavers to go to see the collection, because we can do it in the exhibition, but no, you don't have the exhibition forever. So now they want to see the collection, but we don't have like the space. So now we need money to change the collection in another place, and yes, so money is difficult also. It's important. Yeah, I don't like to say that, but it's true. It's a reality. Yes.
Well, this is our time for session 3. We have a break after this, so you can continue the conversation and ask questions. Yeah. Also, if anybody would like to come down and meet the bird, you're welcome to do so.
If I
Learn
may
more about it.
add that this is May here, Blue Throated Macaw, and this is Marine Fine Feathered Friends Foundation.org rescues birds in the area. There you go. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, no,
Thank
that's
you.
great.
Sorry about that.
Thank you, everybody.